Hey guys, it's Chris. From long-lost bunkers to a real sword pulled out of a lake, here are 11 incredible discoveries. Number 11. Four-legged whale. If you were to picture a whale right now, you would no doubt see various things in your mind. But one thing you would not see, no doubt, is legs on the whale. And yet in Peru, the fossil of a 43-million-year-old creature that very much is a four-legged whale has been discovered. Even stranger, this whale creature doesn't just have 4 feet. It also has a tail that's very much unlike any other whales in the ocean. While the discovery of said creature is incredible on its own, its location is also something that must be noted in terms of importance. Mainly in that when scientists built a timeline of the evolution of whales, they felt that they had evolved in specific regions, mainly in Asia. And yet this was found in the complete opposite hemisphere. This is the most complete specimen ever found of a four-legged whale outside of India and Pakistan. Dr. Oliver Lambert, a scientist at the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Scientists and co-author of the study, said, "This find raises all sorts of questions, including if whales were ever a creature that lived on land. Furthermore, this breed of whale was about 13 feet long based on the remains and fossils found. That is much smaller than most whales that are found today." Yet despite these contradictions and curiosities, scientists are still enamored with whales as a species. Whales are this iconic example of evolution, Travis Park, an ancient whale researcher at the Natural History Museum in London, said. They went from small-hoofed mammals to the blue whale we have today. It's so interesting to see how they conquered the oceans. Number 10. German World War II bunker. World War II was a key part of human history for numerous reasons, not the least of which was because of the rise of the Third Reich, whose power and influence reached across and conquered much of Europe, Asia, and even the top parts of Africa. You would think that with all this time that has passed, all the artifacts of their conquering would have been found, but you'd be wrong. In 2018, a discovery in the Gulf of Finland revealed a buried German bunker, complete with an anti-aircraft gun that was perfectly preserved. What's more, this particular bunker was buried under 10 feet of sand, making it clear that someone didn't want it to be found. Believe it or not, many of these squat bunkers existed in the Gulf of Finland, where many of these bunkers were found. At one point, the German forces ruled the island and used them for the siege of Leningrad. But when they were forced to flee in 1944, they had to abandon many of these bunkers, leaving them to the elements in most cases. All sorts of relics from the Germans' time there can be found on the island. Number 9. Dragon and Griffin megaliths. These enormous carvings were made during the last ice age. Due to the process of time and weather, it's impossible to know all the things that have been lost to time made by ancient people. However, luckily in Russia, 2 giant megaliths were rediscovered after people noticed that there was something different about 2 giant stones. Someone had clearly carved something into them. The megaliths were determined to be of a dragon and a griffin, 2 ancient creatures that were extremely important in many mythologies. They look distorted now because of weather and time, but the shapes can still be partially seen. The rocks that made up the megaliths are made of granite and were clearly hand-carved, but they're also not new by any means. Based on estimates, these sculptures are over 12,000 years old, which makes it all the more curious that they even exist at all, because the time, energy, effort, and creativity needed to make these sculptures would have been quite difficult. Granite is not easy to carve and shape, and to do it at the end of the previous ice age makes it even more confusing. At present, the people researching the megaliths do not know the who or the how in regard to them being made. Number 8. Artifacts from 78,000 years of life. In Kenya, a cave system was found that had traces of human life and human technological advancement that ranged from the Stone Age to the Middle Ages. That's 78,000 years, roughly, of people living in this cave system if the remains are to be taken at face value, which makes it quite an incredible find to those who truly love history and the path that was taken by certain people through the ages like this seems to be. The place itself is called the Panga Yasedi, and within this cave system is a massive chamber that is over 1,000 square feet in size. It was here that the artifacts were found from the various periods of human life. As for what exactly was found in the cave, that would be a plethora of items. There were Stone Age toolkits that were shown to be from the later parts of the age itself, as well as various jewelry pieces like beads. Based on the size of the cave system, it's believed that potentially thousands of people could have lived here, which is interesting not just because the area does have a climate that can easily support life, but also many early humans were thought to only live in areas near coastlines. But this clearly isn't the case, and thus the find changes the way we look at early human life. If more places like this cave could be found, it could help paint an even grander and more elaborate picture for what life was like for these people through the ages. And now for number 7. But first, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for more videos like these. Number 7. Stone Age tools that rewrite history. One of the biggest questions about humanity was, when did they start to leave Africa to populate the rest of the world? At one point, people believed that the answer was 60,000 years ago. But new findings put that all in doubt. This all started with a dig site in southern India that found tools from very long ago. To be more specific, over 200,000 years ago. These tools were from the Stone Age, and yet they were over 150,000 years before the group of Africans came out of the continent. This led many scientists to wonder how the tools got there long before they should have. This clearly shows that populations with this culture were present in most parts of South Asia, adopting to local factors and with tool types evolving and changing through time, said Shanti Pappu from the Sharma Center for Heritage Education in India. The new theory that's being formed is that the Homo sapiens of Africa actually left the continent in massive groups, some going out hundreds of thousands of years before the others for one reason or another. This would explain how the tools got there, and yet how the European continent was not occupied by Homo sapiens until later. An initiative is taking place to try and find more ancient Stone Age tools, date them, and figure out what happened and when. Should more be found, a new timeline of human life could be made, and if that happens, human history could truly be written and rewritten at the same time. Number 6. Hobbits. In literature, a hobbit is a small humanoid from the Lord of the Rings saga. In 2003, though, real-life remains of hobbits were discovered in Indonesia via the island of Flores. The key find was a skeleton that was much smaller than a human's. Add to that the rest of the skeleton, and it was revealed to be a person who was only 3.5 feet tall, despite being a fully grown adult. Granted, there are people who can be that small via genetic conditions, like microcephaly, but further research and more bones found on the island pointed to these hobbits actually being an entire species of man from one point in time, now known as Homo Floresiensis, after the island they were discovered on. But while these finds were definitive in proving that this species existed at one point, it raises many other questions, including how many of them existed on Earth, where do they fit into the hominin tree of life, and why did they all apparently die out? Number 5. Xanadu. No, the real one, not the one from the song. There were many stories of China that Marco Polo told upon his return to Italy, but one of the grandest was that of the palace of Kublai Khan, first ruler of China during the Yuan dynasty. Khan had a palace so grand and magnificent that it said he kept 10,000 white horses on the premises, had a massive park right outside, and it was all made of marble. Furthermore, Marco Polo also noted that the palace had massive dragon statues as well. But when the Ming army destroyed most of it in 1369, no one from Europe or beyond had the chance to look at it with their own eyes. As time went on, the palace only became something of myths and legends. Eventually, though, it was rediscovered, and with it came vindication for Marco Polo, as his descriptions of the building were very nearly perfect. The park was there, as were remains of many horses via fossilized bones. The palace was even twice that of the White House, even in terms of size. The palace is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site and visited by many. As for the dragon statues, those were also found in the area. The dragons were actually on top of pillars, exactly where Marco Polo said they would be. Number 4. Sword in the Lake. There's an Arthurian legend that states that King Arthur gave his legendary sword Excalibur to the Lady of the Lake in order to keep it safe and fulfill his destiny. In modern times, a young girl actually found a very old sword in a lake. You see, this young girl was on vacation. Young Saigo went to Vidstern Lake to relax and have fun. And while she was having fun in the water, she stepped on something odd. When she pulled it up, it was an oddly shaped piece of metal. So naturally, she took it, and when she looked at it some more, she realized it was a sword. I picked it up and was gonna drop it back in the water, but it had a handle, and I saw that it was a little bit pointy at the end and all rusty, she told the local. I held it up in the air and I said, "Daddy, look, I found a sword." After showing it to her parents, they took it to some experts, and they found out that the sword is actually 1,000 years old. And it's also possible it could be even older than that, which would mean it's actually older than the Vikings of that era. This in and of itself is relevant, as it would help paint a picture for what was going on in this area in that time period, which could lead to more discoveries, depending on what that fact could uncover. Number 3. Peking Man. A constant desire for mankind in terms of archaeology is to know where man came from and when it evolved. The fossilized remains of primitive man are a great help to this. And in China in the 1920s, certain major bones were found to help fill in this picture. From the years 1929 to 1937, 15 partial crania, 11 mandibles, many teeth, and some skeletal bones and large numbers of stone tools were discovered in the lower cave at locality 1 at what is now called the Peking Man site at Zhoukoudian. At first, due to technology, it was unclear when these bones were left behind. And then in 2009, it was revealed that they were at least 750,000 years old, give or take. Based on the bones and their structure, the Peking Man was recreated in a way so we could visualize what it looked like. Through that, many questions about how the species known as Homo Erectus related to humanity as a whole. Some see it as a true ancestor, while others see it as failed evolution. Number 2. The Library of ASHURBANIPAL. Texts from the ancient world are rare, or worse, not in very good condition to learn from. So imagine the joy of archaeologists in 1850, when they found a hidden library in Kirian Sheikh, Iraq, that held within it tablets of stories from long ago. While that may not sound like much at first, context here is everything. And the context here is that this library of clay tablets once belonged to ASHURBANIPAL, a man who once ruled an ancient kingdom, Assyria, from 668 BC to around 630 BC. So that alone made it a rare find. But also in the find was the fact that there were 30,000 writings within the library. Historical texts, administrative and legal documents, medical texts, magical manuscripts, and literary works were all inside. In fact, one of the clay tablets told the legendary story of Gilgamesh, which is considered one of the earliest surviving pieces of literature ever. Many of the pieces of this library can now be found in the Museum of Britain, and those who look upon them marvel at the unparalleled importance of these tablets, due to how they help show the ways of an ancient kingdom and their love of text. Number 1. Celtic origins. A man named Bertie Curry was doing some work on his land where he owned a bar in Northern Ireland. He was trying to make a driveway, but instead found himself looking at some human bones. Knowing what to do, he called the police, but they determined that he wasn't sitting on a murder scene or anything of the like. The bones were taken to archaeologists to study, and they found something they didn't expect. The bones that Curie had found were old. In fact, they were older than the Celts that had landed in Ireland by over 1,000 years, if not more. So why is that significant? Common belief is that the original Celts made it to Ireland from Britain between 1000 and 500 BC, but the bones found here were from around 2000 BC, which changes the history of the nation in many ways. This, in turn, has caused many people to argue about what the finding of these bones actually means. Does this mean that they weren't from Britain? Did they maybe come from the Middle East? Did we simply have our timetables wrong? No one is really sure, and though these bones were found in 2006, the answers still aren't clear. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these incredible discoveries? Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to World List before you leave, and I'll see you next time.